Welcome to our never daily dose of D. I'm D, and we're gonna read some shit. We have a special guest today who might be making some appearances and might not be making some appearances. We will see. It is a furry beast. It's been so long, you can't tell my hair is pink. And not because I made it pink, but because I bleached it. And all the other colors that were underneath it, the bleaching, it's pink. So, it's not bad. It's not bad. I actually really like it. Toned it up. It kind of makes it fairly even. It's nice. I like it. It works. It does the job. It fits on my head, and that's what all it needs to do. I'm just gonna start reading because I haven't done this in a mad long time, and I'm just trying to. The original goal of this was so that I would read more because I love reading. And I can't focus on it anymore. I cannot. Oh, my bags are great. My bag looks so good. I look really, this is really great lighting for my bags, actually. Tis not. But then I look weird. I can't really see. What if we do it like... That's not bad. That's a lot nicer on my face. Anyways, so I did this so I would read more, and it clearly worked out very, very well. Normally we start with some poetry or something, and I don't think I have a poetry book at the moment. So we're gonna do a quick little looky poo and see if I've got anything funny. I did have one. There was a nice one. It said, this weekend safety brief. Don't add to the population, don't subtract from the population, don't end up in the hospital, newspaper, or jail. If you end up in jail, establish dominance quickly. Not quite as funny. Not so many are right, so I don't. Alright, nope, that's what I got. Alright. Roses are red, violets are blue. My life is boring, anyone can write a haiku. That was not a haiku, I don't think. I think they're only supposed to have 3 lines. Anyways, I'm gonna stop the accent now because it's distracting apparently sometimes. Anyways, we are going to read from Slavoj Zizek, one of the wonderful, brilliant minds. Heaven in Disorder. And hopefully I have a bookmark, and I do. I always love when I have bookmarks because I can never remember where I am. We are in chapter 19. That's impressive. I did not realize I had read them this much. And it's called Trump's Barber Paradox. Enough. I love you. You can come cuddle, but you don't need to incessantly lick, okay? That's not safe self-soothing. Relax. Okay. Are you okay? Can I pet you? Good girl. Hey. Okay. Trump's barber paradox. I really hope this doesn't echo too bad. For 30 years, Donald Trump regularly visited the Paul Mollet barber shop in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Adrian Wood Ew. What? Okay. Adrian Wood, the barber who owns the shop, remembers that Trump would instruct barbers precisely where to snip his mane and would never allow them to expose his bald spot. He's a complete control freak. He dictates exactly how you cut every hair on his head. Cut here, cut there. That's enough, and you just do what he says. Now, in November 2020, as Trump repeatedly evokes the prospect that before leaving office, he might pardon himself amid state investigations into his business and finances, the surrounding debate throws us back into the self-reference paradoxes discussed for millennia, like the one falsely attributed to Bertrand Russell about a barber who shaves only those who do not shave themselves. Does this barber shave himself? If he does, then he obviously violates the rule of shaving only those who do not shave themselves. If he doesn't, he falls in the category of those who do not shave themselves, so he can shave himself. What happens if we apply this paradox to Trump? Can he pardon himself? Common sense tells us that the president, or any other supreme authority like a monarch, who has the right to pardon persons judged and condemned by a court, can only pardon those who cannot pardon themselves. If all condemned can pardon themselves, a large majority of them would do so. If he can pardon himself, then he needs pardon, which means he is a common person who violated the law and, as such, cannot pardon himself. But the solution to these paradoxes is, in the case of Trump, relatively simple. Trump himself, the self-professed protector of law and order, perceives himself as standing above the law. The implication of his claim that he can pardon himself is that he ultimately doesn't need to be pardoned because what he does is not contained by the law. But there's another problem here. The privilege of giving pardon is usually reserved for monarchs or presidents who do not hold executive power, i.e., whose function is, as we say, symbolic and ceremonial. I have terrible posture. Hegel clearly saw the necessity of the gap that separates the monarch from executive power. Totalitarian temptation arises when the two levels collapse into one another, i.e., when the nominal head of state also holds executive power. This happens not only in fascist and Stalinist totalitarianism, although in the case of Italy, Mussolini did not hold both roles. Italy remained a monarchy, but it also inscribed into the very constitution, but is also inscribed into the very Constitution of the United States. The United States is unique in that the president is not exempt from executive power. The two functions are united, which is why U.S. presidents can rule with executive orders, largely ignoring Congress and the Senate. Where does this prerogative come from? Eric Nelson, in his The Royalist Revolution, convincingly demonstrates that it was admiration for royal prerogative power and belief in the virtues of a strong executive, both derived from 17th century precedents that fostered the rebellion against Britain and shaped the constitution of the new American Republic. The American Revolution came out of a royalist, not a parliamentarian, tradition. First, the American Revolution came out of a royalist, not a parliamentarian, tradition. First, the Founding Fathers hoped that the British king would protect them against the tyranny of the British Parliament raising taxes on the American colonies. When this did not happen, they incorporated this image of a monarch with executive powers into their constitution. This decision of the Founding Fathers has fateful consequences even today. What Obama and Trump share, all their contrasts notwithstanding, is the excessive use of executive orders. It is not that the United States is really a monarchy, but that, in some sense, it is even worse than a constitutional monarchy. It is like a monarchy in which the monarch also has executive power, which can limit parliamentary oligarchy. However, the irony of history... Relax! Relax! Come here! Come here. No, Timmy. Relax. Shh, 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 shh. Hey, baby. Hey. Stop. Go relax. My apologies. There's our special guest. Baby! Come here! Okay. Sometimes she doesn't like the neighbors. Are we all done? Ah! Relax. Can you sit down? Hey. Here you go. Hey. Hey. Calm down. Relax. Relax. Good girl. Oh, good girl. Relax. Okay. That's a good relax. Good relax. Can you sit? Sit. Thank you. Your eyes okay? I know, that was great. I am sorry. Good girl. Good girl. All right. My apologies once again. Pardon the intrusion. She's a great gal. Sincerely, love the shit. We're still working on how we're treating the neighbors though. So. It is even worse than a constitutional monarchy. It is like a monarchy in which the monarch also has executive power, which can limit parliamentary oligarchy. However, the irony of history teaches us that maybe something good can come out of this danger. I can't breathe. Remember how, at the beginning of his presidency, Trump used his executive orders to proclaim a state of national emergency. His critics were shocked at how he applied this measure, clearly intended only for great catastrophes like a threat of war or a natural disaster, in order to build a border wall to protect the United States from an invented threat. However, not only were the Democrats critical of this measure, but some rightists were also alarmed by the fact that Trump's proclamation set a dangerous precedent. What if a future leftist Democratic president proclaimed a national emergency on behalf of, say, global warming? My point is precisely that future leftist presidents should act like this to legitimize fast, extraordinary measures. Global warming effectively is a not an only national emergency. Okay. Chapter 20. How to kill Trump in his notion. On November 23, 2020, Donald Trump agreed to begin his transition out of presidential power, but the way his acceptance was announced says a lot about Trump. It followed the General Services Administration declaration of Joe Biden as the apparent winner of the U.S. election, allowing for the formal transition from Trump's administration to begin. Emily Murphy, head of the GSA, stated in a letter to the president-elect that she came to her decision independently and did not receive pressure from the executive branch. Note the reference to Biden as the apparent election winner. If the opposite of appearance is essence, this qualification implies that essentially Trump won, whatever the final result of recounting. However, minutes after Murphy's letter was first reported, Trump tweeted that he had given Murphy permission to send the letter, though he vowed to continue protesting his own defeat. His campaign team would continue to push its supporters to back fundraising efforts in a last-ditch bid to beat the election outcome. So Trump accepted the transition without conceding defeat, permitting acts made independently of his will. He is a living contradiction, the ultimate postmodern ironist who presents himself as a guardian of traditional Christian values, the ultimate demolisher of law and order who presents himself as its unconditional safeguard. A similar tension is found in how Trump relates to the far right, and specifically in how he seeks to formally distance himself from its most problematic aspects while praising its general patriotic attitude. This distance is, of course, empty, a purely rhetorical device. While weakly condemning the worst aspects of groups like the Proud Boys, telling them to stand back, Trump simultaneously makes clear his expectation for them to stand by, to act upon the implicit calls to violence in his speeches. Trump's response to the Proud Boys is just one illustration of how his excesses should be taken seriously. In a rare appearance supporting her husband in the 2020 electoral campaign, Melania Trump denounced Biden's socialist agenda. But what about Kamala Harris, who is usually perceived as more left than the extremely moderate Biden? Melania's husband was clear on this point. She's a communist. She's not a socialist. She's well beyond a socialist. She wants to open the borders to allow killers and murderers and rapists to pour into our country. Incidentally, since when are open borders a characteristic of communism? Biden immediately reacted. There's not one single syllable that I've ever said that could lead you to believe that I was a socialist or a communist. Factually true, but this rebuttal misses the point. The dismissal of Biden and Harris as socialist/communist is not simply a rhetorical exaggeration. Trump is not just saying something he knows not to be true. Rather, Trump's exaggerations provide an exemplary case. Exaggerations is in quotes, apologies. An exemplary case of what one should call the realism of notions. The idea that notions are not just names, they structure political space and as such have actual effects. Trump's cognitive mapping of the political space is an almost symmetrical reversal of the Stalinist map in which everybody who opposes the party is considered as part of a fascist plot. In a similar way, from Trump's standpoint, the liberal center is disappearing, or as his friend Viktor Orban put it, liberals are just communists with a diploma, which means they are only two true poles, populist nationalists and communists. There is a wonderful expression in Serb. I'm not gonna... Nebijal ubija upojam. There is no way that that's all correct, but... The expression translates to English as, it doesn't beat it, but it kills it in the concept notion. It refers to somebody who, instead of destroying you with direct violence, bombards you with acts that undermine your self-respect so that you end up humiliated, deprived to the very core notion of your being. To kill a notion describes the opposite of actual destruction of your empirical reality, in which your notion survives in an elevated way. For instance, killing an enemy in such a way that they survive in the mind of thousands as a hero. This is how we should proceed with Nazism. We should not just destroy Hitler to get rid of his excesses and save the same core of his project, but kill him in his notion. And it's the same with Trump and his legacy. The true task is not just to defeat him, opening up the possibility that he will return in 2024. Well, this has aged well. But to kill him in his notion, to make him visible in all his worthless vanity and inconsistency, but also, and this is the crucial part, to ask how such a worthless person could have become the president of the United States. As Hegel would have put it, to kill Trump in his notion means to bring him to his notion, i.e., to allow him to destroy himself simply by way of making him appear as what he is. Lovely. There we go. Now we get to move on to more. All right, we're going to do two kind of political, because living is political. And then we'll end it with a nice little fictional story. Back with Hitchhikers. I found the book. But the next book that we're reading is called America's Deadliest Export, Democracy. The Truth About U.S. Foreign Policy and Everything Else by William Blum. All of my books are written by categorically white men. But in today's society, at least Zizek isn't. I'm lying. Oh, I need to take that back so bad. I don't know my authors. I was wrong. I am wrong. I am not wrong. I am not wrong. They all are. Just let that reality just... These are the books that we have available. And there are other ones, but... Why are they so hard to find? Anyways. Very smart people. I very much agree with them and think that they write quite eloquently. Worth noting. I'm not entirely sure where we left off. We're gonna start on this one. So, we're in America's Deadliest Export, The Empire's Deep Dark Secret. What were we talking about? I'm not sure. In my opinion, any future defense secretary who advises the president to again send a big American land army into Asia or into the Middle East or Africa should have his head examined, declared Obama's Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, on February 25th, 2011. Remarkable. Every one of the many wars the United States has engaged in since the end of World War II has been presented to the American people, explicitly or implicitly, as a war of necessity. Not a war of choice, a war urgently needed to protect American citizens, American allies, vital American interests, freedom and or democracy, or kill dangerous anti-American terrorists and various other bad guys. Here is President Obama speaking of Afghanistan. But we must never forget, this is not a war of choice. This is a war of necessity. This being the case, how can a future administration say it will not go to war if any of these noble causes is seriously threatened? The answer, of course, is that these noble causes are irrelevant. The United States goes to war where and when it wants. And if a noble cause is not self-evident, the government, with indispensable help from the American media, will manufacture one. Secretary Gates is now admitting that there is a choice involved. Well, Bob, thanks for telling us. You were Bush's Secretary of Defense as well, and before that spent 26 years in the CIA and National Secretary Council. You sure know how to keep a secret. I'm gonna pause. I'll be back. Can I do it?